Please, don't do this to me. I'll die out there. Tiffany crumpled to the floor, phone shaking against her ear. A gruff voice crackled.
I'm sorry, Tiffany. Our runner in your area got caught on his latest delivery, and my other guy barely made it back. He saw Jimmy get hauled into the van, and they've probably torn him apart by now.
Please, I don't have any food left in the house. I'll never make it out there. They'll spot me immediately.
Listen, Tiff. It's gonna be okay. Listen to me, alright? There's a shop 1 block away from you.
I can't.
You have to. Okay, all you have to do is get in and get out. Put on the darkest sunglasses you have. You have shades, right?
Tiffany glanced up to the cabinet, her terrified face reflected at her through the polarized lenses. Uh-huh.
That's good. That's real good. Now, you put those on, and you grab enough food for a week, while I find a replacement runner. Okay?
Okay.
And Tiffany, remember to smile. Smile as wide as you can, and never drop it. You know what happens if they suspect.
I know. Thanks, Mark. Tiffany hung up the phone with a shuddering exhale. She stood up and looked herself over in the mirror. A terrified blonde woman stared back, eyes wide with fear. She wiped her tears and smoothed out her locks. Shaky hands grasped her oversized sunglasses. She bent over, adjusting them carefully to ensure no trace of her eyes could be seen. Glancing down, she looked over her list of food. Enough for a week. Get in, get out, and smile. Before turning to leave, she smiled into the mirror. The upturned mouth seemed almost foreign to her. She hadn't laughed since everyone had been torn. There weren't many of her left in the world. The joyous reigned supreme. She stretched her smile as wide as it could go, until her cheeks strained with the effort. Exhaling through her teeth, she grasped the handle. The doorknob shook from her grip. Get it together. In and out. She twisted the knob and threw the door open. An eyeless face sprang up to meet her. Tiffany screamed and jumped back.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you.
Tiffany clutched her heaving chest, trying to calm herself. The woman standing on her stoop had no eyes, only dark, empty sockets, each gleaming with a glowing pinprick of light. An enormous smile spread from ear to ear. Tiffany forced words from her paralyzed mind. It's all right. I was just about to get some shopping done. The woman stared, unblinking, with her flickering pits. She lifted a newspaper.
I saw this blow over onto the street, so I thought I'd bring this little old newsie inside.
Tiffany accepted the paper, praying she looked relaxed. She took a quick glimpse at the headline. Joy. New York mayor declares city over 99% pure on 1-year anniversary.
Aw, I see you have just been freed. Congratulations, dear. How do you like the colors?
The woman bent her head closer to Tiffany's face. Her heart hammered in her throat as her eyes were drawn to the woman's scars. Black lines spiderwebbed all across her body, down her arms, over her face, and plunged down her low-cut shirt.
Aw, I remember when I was freed. I didn't really have scars either. I found a great doctor who touched me up. I can share his number with you.
She lifted her neck, showing off her scars wrapped around her throat.
Yes, the colors, they're so beautiful. Yeah, the doctor said I was one of the lucky ones. Guess tough skin runs in the family.
Tiffany tried to laugh as she spoke. The woman leaned back, her smile somehow widening even more.
Ah, tragic. Stay safe, you hear? A naughty somebody escaped the hospital recently. Ah, there he is now. Isn't he silly?
She pointed to the distance. Tiffany turned her head in the direction of her arm. Her heart sank to her stomach. The street rose on an incline. The distant figure of a man climbed into sight at the crest of the hill. His sandy hair was unmistakable. Tiffany lifted a trembling hand to her mouth. Jimmy? Jimmy, was naked, with blood pouring in rivets all down the front of his torso. As she squinted, she realised that Jimmy's body wasn't moving. It hung limp, limbs dangling in the air. Her darting eyes widened as she saw his legs hovered off the road. 4 thick tendrils pulsated out of Jimmy's gaping mouth. The dark trunk spilled out onto the ground, suspending his frame in midair. The shadowy pillars supported his body-like makeshift legs. Jimmy lolled back and forth as the inhuman limbs propelled him down the hill like a beast. Tiffany's stomach churned in knots as he careened down the street. He couldn't speak, but his bulging eyes, darting all around, spoke all that was needed. Her gaze adhered to the incomprehensible stalks that moved of their own accord. The tentacles shimmered and writhed all over, smaller tendrils branching off, thrashing independently of one another. Right as he passed Tiffany, he tripped and skidded to the ground. The husks all around her burst into raucous laughter at the sight of it clambering back up. The woman doubled over in giggles.
Oh, you silly goose. Don't even know what's good for ya.
Jimmy's chest bloated and bubbled. The bulge travelled up his throat, extending it to an inhuman width. A horrid squelching erupted as 2 pink sacs attached to tubes slithered out of his mouth, travelling along the lengths of the trunks. Tiffany could barely support her own weight at the sight of Jimmy's lungs pulsating in frantic breaths. Her horrified gaze watched as the lungs enlarged in a deep breath, a gurgling crescendo in pitch. They expanded to full size and hung still for an instant, then exploded in desperate screams.
Help me! Please! I'm alive like you!
With the roar of an engine and a screech of tyres, a vehicle slammed into Jimmy's body. A spray of blood rained on Tiffany and the crowd. A white van screeched to a halt just as Jimmy flew through the air, all 8 limbs flailing in the wind. No amount of bracing could prepare Tiffany for the sound of bones crushing as Jimmy landed in a bloody mess on the asphalt. The crowd of husks hooped and hollered. The drivers clambered out of the vehicle and took deep bows. Wiping off blood, Tiffany inspected the logo on the van. It displayed 2 cartoon men, each standing on the side of another person. The person was divided into 2 halves. One side was human with a smiling face, while the other was a shadowy figure, screaming in agony. The smiling men each pulled on an arm as if separating the halves.
Sorry, folks. We had a feisty one here. We'll take care of it from here.
He drew a syringe from his pocket.
That's okay. Need a hand?
The woman called back to enthusiastic nods from the crowd. The van driver waved his arm in the direction of Jimmy's limp body. Tiffany blinked back burning tears as she watched Jimmy twitch on the ground. The husks closed in around him, laughing as they surrounded him. She wanted nothing more than to just retreat inside and vomit. But an opportunity presented itself. Streams of people poured out of the shop ahead, drawn to the spectacle on the street. The sidewalks leading up to the store cleared. Her path would never be this open again. Tearing her eyes from Jimmy, she walked as fast as possible to the market, her smile twitching in anguish. After what felt like hours, she stood at the entrance to the food mart. She moved her jaw around to loosen it, almost flinching as it popped. Okay, in and out, then you're safe. Running over her mental list one last time, she barged inside. A wave of frigid air washed over her. She scanned the shop, exhaling out a sigh of relief as she confirmed it was mostly empty. Only a mother pushing a stroller joined her in the market. Tiffany whipped out a shopping cart and sped down aisle by aisle, eyes darting. She grasped each item on her list as if it were manna from heaven. Her breathing eased as she made it to the other side of the store without incident. A small bit of happiness welled up within her as she looked over her bulging wagon. It was enough to last her 2 weeks. 2 blissful weeks of safety. All she had to do was get out. She scurried to the checkout lane. The mother was in front of her, the groceries crinkling as they were backed by the cheerful cashier. Tiffany's knuckles gripped the cart so hard they turned white. Please, just pay and leave. Tiffany's heart skipped a beat as the mother twisted her neck to look at her. Empty sockets crinkled as the young woman's smile widened.
Why, hello there. Any idea what the ruckus is out there?
A collective cheer erupted outside in the distance. Tiffany shook her head, trying to push Jimmy's battered body out of her thoughts. She glanced at Tiffany's cart.
Big haul. You having a party?
Tiffany nodded, almost forgetting to breathe.
Am I invited? Where do you live?
Tiffany gulped. The mother roared with laughter.
Oh, dearie me, I'm just kidding you. I'd love to go, but this little man down here takes up all my time. Wanna say hi?
Tiffany nodded again, her cheeks screaming with the strain of her fake smile. The mother lifted the hood of the stroller and wheeled it around, facing Tiffany. An eyeless baby cooed up at her, its sockets nearly taking up half its face. Black scars lined its entire body, lashing its face that carved itself into a wide smile. Tiffany screamed in terror, springing back. Light streamed into her eyes as they watered. Time almost stopped as she glanced down at her sunglasses. Shuddering, she looked back up. The mother, baby, and cashier stared at her. Without taking his sockets off her, the cashier pressed a button on the counter. An intercom cracked to life.
Attention all employees. We have someone in pain over here. Please call the authorities while we restrain her.
Tiffany threw the cart to the ground, sprinting to the glass double doors. Talon-like fingers dug into her shoulder right as she reached the exit. No, please, let me go, please.
Now, why would I do that, sweetie? Don't worry, we're going to help you. See? They're already here to heal you.
Tiffany's heart sank into her stomach as she watched the same van that crashed into Jimmy park outside. Two men dressed in scrubs burst out the back, wheeling out a gurney. Her eyes bulged as she gazed at the restraints gleaming cruelly in the morning light. The smiling men jaunted over to her. Tiffany ground her heel into the mother's toes, the arms holding her released. She rushed forward to the man on the left, throwing a wild punch in desperation. To her surprise, knuckles connected, slamming the man's head back to its side. Rough hands grabbed her arms by the elbows, jerking them behind her. The man she'd punched twisted his head back, the unnatural smile still plastered on his face.
Now, simmer down, young lady.
He snatched her kicking feet and lifted her in tandem with the other man. With inhuman strength, they slammed her onto the gurney. She flailed, straining her limbs against their grasp. Her shoulders popped in her sockets, her screams erupting in pain and fear. Cold metal clamped down on her right wrist. 3 more clicks restrained her completely. No, please. Just let me go. I'll never bother you again.
Oops. Gotta make some room.
She wailed as she watched the men drag Jimmy's corpse out of the back and tossed it onto the sidewalk. The door slammed shut, and the vehicle sped off. Desperation gave way to despair for Tiffany. She wept bitterly. She gasped as the men wiped away tears on each side of her face. They lifted their fingers to their eyeless pits, staring in wonder at the droplet forming. Mouths parted and making soft cooing sounds.
I remember my last tear. What about you, Ted?
The man on her left nodded, sucking his fingers.
Yeah, I almost missed the taste.
They both roared in laughter at the same time. The van jolted to a halt. The man flung the doors open.
Don't worry, Missy. It will all be over soon.
She shook her head, pleading for anyone she passed to help her as she was wheeled into the hospital. All she received was condescending smiles and pats on the hand. She was sped into an operating room. Her eyes widened in terror at the sight of the tearing chair. A medical bay lay on the middle of the chamber. A bar of light hung at the bed's foot. The bar crossed over the width of the bed, attached to a track that ran along the length from the bottom to the top. Her heart sank. She'd expected cutting instruments, but the lack of them frightened her even more. A grinning doctor finished washing her hands in the nearby sink, pulling latex gloves on.
Oh, dearie me, look at this poor soul. It's been a while since I've gotten freed one so large. The gals will take it from here, boys.
Masked women in scrubs burst from the doors to assist. Even behind the masks, their smiles were visible. They all carried scissors. Within seconds, they snipped off all of her clothes, leaving her naked on the gurney. The doctor lifted a syringe, the end dripping with a sedative.
Now, we need you to be still for this next part, sweetie.
She rammed the needle into her hip and thumbed the plunger down. She gasped as the burning liquid clouded into her bloodstream. At once, her extremities deadened, all feeling and control gone. A pair of arms gripped each of her limbs as she was lifted off the gurney and thrown onto the medical bed. The doctor looked down at her at the foot of the bed, grasping the bar of light. It pulsated in waves of colour as she clinked it into place over Tiffany's feet, so that the luminescence only hovered an inch over her skin. The soles of her feet writhed in agony in the light's presence. Tiffany screamed at the burning tendrils within her feet. A horrific thought pierced her torment in a single moment of clarity. Something is moving inside me. Using the last vestiges of motor control left, she lifted her head an inch, eyes glued to her feet. Various ridges rolled around on the tops of her feet, almost as if something flailed to get away from the brilliant light. The doctor traced a finger over the thrashing bulges.
Yes, the time for your last pain draws near, little one. No longer will you torment this young woman. No longer.
She placed both hands on the instrument bar.
Now, I must warn you, this will hurt. More than anything you've ever felt in your life. But what awaits you on the other side is...
Please. Tiffany whimpered, but the doctor pushed the bar of light up her legs. Torture. Pure agony. Tiffany screamed to the point she thought her jaw might pop off its hinges. The writhing in her feet intensified, pulling and tearing at her skin. A spurt of blood spewed over the doctor's face.
Ah, we've crowned.
What is this? Tiffany screeched as she looked down. Blackened tentacles whipped violently back and forth, sprouting from her feet.
Oh, it's the sickness, my sweet. It must be purged. Deep breath. And here we go.
She pushed the bar of light even further along its track, this time going up her legs. Molten lines of agony traced themselves up her legs in tandem with the glow. Tiffany's eyes rolled up into her head and then back down again, casting her world in revolving darkness and light. The skin at her legs tore, thicker tendrils bursting out in viscous spray. The dark veins slapped at the doctor's face, but a smiling nurse grasped the flailing trunks and pinned them down as the doctor pressed on above her knees and up her thighs. Her skin bubbled and burst as the bleeding mass on each limb fled from the light. Tiffany stared, transfixed at the monster birthed from her. The spindling body, the erratic, desperate movement of a trapped beast. The bar stopped just below her groin.
This is probably the worst part, dearie. Brace yourself.
She yanked it forward up to her abdomen. Tiffany's voice tore, her throat bleeding raw. She's never given birth before. The monster springing out from her womanhood made a poor substitute for a child.
There you go, baby. You're doing so well. Halfway done.
The instrument slid up her stomach, passing over her arms. The sickness within gripped her organs in a vain attempt to resist being torn out. Strands of obsidian wrested themselves out of her torso, only to be collected and restrained by the unflinching nurses. Up her body they all went, up her chest, her shoulders, and onto her neck. Right at the base of her chin, the bar of light chinked as it came to the end of its track. The beast within Tiffany screeched, straining at the nurse's restraints. Forgetting the pain for an instant, Tiffany croaked, "What is this thing?" The doctor wiped blood out of her sockets.
It's your parasite. What you thought you were. I know it hurts. This thing feeds off pain. Don't worry, we're almost done.
She pivoted 2 smaller bars of light up to Tiffany's head, one on each side. They swung in such a way that they would meet in the middle. Her eyes swiveled independently of each other, as if they too feared the light. The doctor smiled at the erratic movement.
Oh yes, feel fear. It's what you deserve. It's all you deserve.
She grasped each bar of light and clammed them together. Blinding pressure built up in Tiffany's eardrums, as if she were being stabbed in each ear with knives, aching to meet in the middle. An incessant ringing tingled, building up pitch and intensity until it was all she could hear. Her brain lit aflame, seething at the burning from the sound. Make it stop! Make it stop! But she couldn't hear her voice anymore, like a cord being unplugged from a speaker. Her world fell silent. One pull at a time. Black tendrils whipped in her sight as the beast fled from her ear canals. The light passed in her vision. The doctor spoke unheard words. She tried to close her eyes, but they weren't hers anymore. They swiveled all about in their sockets, trying to escape her skull, but there was no escape. Not for a parasite. The light slammed shut, meeting in the middle right over her. The kaleidoscope of luminescence overtook everything. Her world melded to an ever-changing sea of merging lights. Her thoughts, her consciousness, her very essence whirled in her brain. A dark hole sprouted in her psyche. Her being swirled around the murky depths of her existence, spinning to the choreography of the light's pulse. Round and round it went, until she thought her last words. Who am I? All grew dark. The operating room light blinded Tiffany. She tried to close her eyes, but found she had no lids. She saw the metal tray she lay on. She saw the black, spindly legs of her body laying in a tangled heap in the tray. She saw Tiffany laying on the medical table. What? Her psyche ran stark with shock as she watched herself sit up from the medical table. Her eyes were gone, replaced with 2 glowing pits burning in deep sockets. Blood trails crisscrossed all over her venous scars. Tears of crimson flowed from her pits as she sobbed into her hands. No, that's me. But then, who am I? She glanced up and received her horrifying answer. An operating mirror hung on the ceiling above her. What she had once thought as herself was now nothing more than a branch of eyeballs attached to a spinal stem with nervous branches tangled and heaped on a small tray. She was the parasite. The real Tiffany sobbed, a wide smile stretching across her face. Colours. So many colours. The doctor handed her a pair of sunglasses.
Here, put these on and keep them on for the next couple of weeks. The parasites could only see a thin spectrum of light. You can see all of it now. It's a bit overwhelming at first, but you get used to it.
The real Tiffany placed the sunglasses on her face, then clutched at her chest. Wait, what? What is this feeling? It burns yet. It's warm all over. The doctor knelt at the real Tiffany's side.
It's happiness. Pure happiness. It's what the parasite over there denied you.
The doctor shot a glare to the nerve bundle that used to be Tiffany. The real Tiffany released her chest. How long has it been inside of me?
We aren't sure when these parasites fused with humans, but it must have been millennia ago. They've been entwined with us so long, we even once thought they were part of our bodies. The nervous system. What a cruel joke. These things thrive off our happiness and only feed us pain in return.
The doctor shot the nerve bundle a look. Even though she smiled, Tiffany could feel the doctor's contempt radiating.
Look at how pathetic it is. Can't even move anymore. These things rely on our central brain systems to move. Once separated, they are immobile. It's rather ironic that they only try to move as we cut into their feeding supply.
The real Tiffany hugged the doctor, who returned the embrace. Thank you for freeing me. The doctor rubbing her back. They released each other. The real Tiffany looked over at the nerve bundle that used to be her. What do we do with it? The doctor grasped the nerve bundle unceremoniously in her palm. Wait, no! I'm me!
We will cast her into the depths of which she came from, of course.
The doctor laughed as she brought the nerve bundle to the trash chute. The nerve bundle glanced down, recoiling in horror. No light graced her final destination.
Good riddance, darling.
The nerve bundle was released and cast into the void. It landed with a plop amongst the other writhing bundles, ruining the day it ever thought it truly existed.